Subaru BRZ TS. No, this is not going to be yet another video where we showcase all the technical details on yet another trim level on the GR86 or BRZ. This is going to be a celebration of what this car is. The FRS and BRZ is how Savage Geese got its start. And since then, we've driven hundreds of cars and put out hundreds of videos. And I think in the recent months or year, a lot of sentiment towards this car has shifted to be largely negative. And take a broad look at what the FRS, BRZ, GT86, GR86 actually are. It's a very affordable, good driving car that can do nearly everything. When you speak to some of the shops that are actually responsible for these cars, shops like Limit Plus One or Counter Space Garage, and track these cars frequently, actually pretty reliable. So the BRZ FRS was first introduced in 2012. That first generation car ran all the way up to almost 2020 or just past that. And those vehicles now are incredibly affordable and largely very similar to drive to the second generation. Now, the second generation of car too is also fairly affordable. You can get BRZs, which strangely seem to hold their value worse than their GR86 equivalent, at least here in the Midwest. Those cars used can be had as low as the mid-20s, which again, for a car that does everything well, drives as well as this, and is a car that you can use year-round, assuming you have snow tires, is a very, very good deal. And the aftermarket at this point is very mature. When we did our original build series on this car in the GR86, we were very early on in this car's life and not everything was been figured out. Since then, companies again like Limit Plus One or Counter Space Garage have fully developed out this aftermarket, and you can do nearly anything you want with a BRZ or GR86. You can turn it into a track car, drift car, perfect street car, or anything else in between. So that we're gonna go take this BRZ TS for a quick drive and discuss, again, why I love this car so much. Setting off for about the billionth time in a GR86 or BRZ. In this case, this is a BRZ TS. Traction control off. Look, this is a car that has been around for a long time and that we have featured many, many times on this channel. And I think because we've experienced it so often, Mark and I have, between the both of us, lost sight of how special this car really is. And I think as a whole, due to some mismanaged PR, a batch of pretty bad engines and failures, the internet has sort of fallen out of love with this car or doesn't appreciate it as much as it probably should. The GR86 and BRZ is a car that you can now buy used under $30,000. and new with discounts in the low 30s. I think for that kind of money, you are getting a lot of driving experience. And the engine is really probably one of the more controversial bits about this vehicle. And if you really stop and think about it, you don't drive a spec sheet, right? You don't drive a 0 to 60 number, 0 to 60 time or horsepower figure. As I've said many times, you drive an experience. And honestly, compared to the legions of forced induction four-poppers for basically all of its competitors, I don't think this engine is any less special. And it does genuinely make power. This car to the wheel makes, depending on the dyno, high 100s, low 200s. When you go to an aftermarket company and you take the step to tune these things, you can make up to 230 wheel horsepower on a conservative dyno if you're on E85, and the mid two teens to the wheel on a 93 tune. You add an oil cooler, you do your requisite reliability modifications. You end up with a naturally aspirated four-popper that revs and makes good power. The thing that all enthusiasts seem to lust after. The fact that this car doesn't weigh 4,000 pounds like nearly everything else in the market. The Z06 is 3,700 pounds, a car I own. My Camaro is about the same amount of weight. Every modern M car is almost 4,000 pounds. While those cars all make a ton of power, they weigh a lot, and this doesn't. And when you drive it on a track or on a back road, because it's light, You don't have to have enormous tires and enormous brakes, and it simplifies the driving experience. And I think, particularly recently, Mark and I have been doing this for seems like a long time now, over 5 years together. We both own the prior generation BRZ and FRS. I had a BRZ, he had an FRS. I did a series on this current generation GR86 early on when the aftermarket wasn't fully developed. I think particularly now, looking back, I forget how good this car is and how joyful it is on a back road, and even on a racetrack. Driving particularly this BRZ TS today, I think I have more fun in this car than any of its equivalent hot hatches. And I think, again, it goes back to the fact that this is a really simple formula. No crazy adaptive dampers, rear drive, a simple torsion diff, a high revving naturally aspirated engine, and a great manual gearbox with some decent, it's not amazing steering, but with some pretty decent steering. I think, I really, really appreciate that. It goes back to the other point too. Because this car is not $1 billion, it's not $60, $50, even $45,000 to buy, your willingness to put this thing on track, to drive it hard, probably goes up as the financial risk goes down. And it's a car that while it is not easy to use it as your only car, you can use it as your only car. I had my original BRZ when I was in university, and it was my only vehicle. I drove it every single day. I moved in it. It's a car that, while again, if you have a huge family, you can't use it as a usable vehicle. Unlike something like a Miata, which is the car that everybody loves, but honestly ends up being a toy, where this is a car that is actually genuinely usable. I think that's what I've come to really, really appreciate about this car, and I hope that more people find themselves in these cars, because if we don't buy them, manufacturers won't make them. Mark and I recently, with this new EV Amazon Bare Basics truck, we're talking about why don't manufacturers make more cars like this? Why don't more sports car companies make back to basic sports cars? And I think there's two parts of it. One, the marketing part. The manufacturers and product planners and engineers have the unenviable task of making every single generation of car objectively better and faster than the last one. And the only real way to do that is with more complex electromechanical systems and more power. It becomes this vicious cycle, and there's the monkey see, monkey do part of it. Some of it too comes to the enthusiast mindset. What people care about is spec sheets, or at least the way people talk about it online, or to their dealers, or even to manufacturers. They get so obsessed with that lap time and making the car faster or better, you lose sight of the driving experience. And that's, so I hit the radio, and that's what I'm getting in this car. And look, if you're not a big lover of this car, I can't really fault you for it. But I think, as we get more and more negative with cars, it's important that you at least give this thing a try in any of its various flavors and experience, to me, what is it easily one of the best driving experiences you can possibly have in modern cars.